Everybody, welcome to the January Planning Committee 2026. We'll move on to agenda item 1. Do we have any apologies? I don't think we do. We're all here, aren't we? Is that right? Yeah, so we're all here. Item 2, the draft minutes of the last meeting. I'd like to propose them as a true and correct record. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pearson, thank you. Any comments on the minutes of the previous meeting? No, so we're happy to go to the vote. All those in favour? Anybody against? And any abstentions? Thank you. So that's passed. Carried, I should say. I'd just like to bring your attention to the Planning Committee protocol. Please make sure you're familiar with it. Thank you. Agenda item 3, are there any declarations of interest, pecuniary or non-pecuniary? So it looks like there aren't any. So we'll move on to agenda item 4. The site is located at 428 Carlton Hill, and we have a speaker on this item who's speaking on behalf of an adjoining business, Dr. James Kitchen. Would you like to come to the lectern and start speaking when ready?
Thank you, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for letting me speak tonight. I'm Dr. James Kitchen, Trentside Medical Group, and work as a GP in the doctor's surgery in the adjacent building to the building in question at 428 Carlton Hill. Building B was occupied by the Midlands Academy of Dance and Drama, a registered charity operating under a Class F1A use. The Academy was forced to relocate to alternative premises. However, the lawful Class F1 use of the building still allows for occupation by a range of community facilities. The officer's report states that the previous occupier was a private dance studio, with the actual lawful use of the property not considered in then seeking to dismiss policy LPD 56, which protects community facilities, as not relevant to the application. The issue here is that the existing Class F1 use does constitute a community facility use, and so policy LPD 56 is relevant to the application. And planning applications involving changes of use of other vacant buildings in Class F1 use, including the former Burton Joyce Community Church, have previously been assessed against this policy. This policy requires it to be demonstrated that it is no longer economically viable, feasible, or practicable to retain an existing community use and for its continued community use to be fully explored. Whilst Building B was not openly marketed, Trentside Medical Group did find out that the sale was proceeding at a late date and did submit a bid to acquire the property due to a need to expand our existing medical operation within Carlton. Unfortunately, we were too late to succeed with this. Had proper open marketing been undertaken, it is highly likely that we would have pursued and succeeded in acquiring the building to continue its Class F2 community use. As regards the application proposals as they stand, our other concerns are that they will provide poor quality one-bedroom accommodation, with the whole submission appearing to be rushed and poorly developed with limited detail provided. We note that there is a national requirement for developments creating 10 or more dwellings to provide sustainable drainage. Changes of use are only exempt if there are no external works. Therefore, while sustainable drainage is required to be provided for this development, it is not proposed. The Council's low carbon planning guidance advises that it applies to developments creating 10 or more dwellings or with no exceptions for changes of use. There is, however, nothing to demonstrate that the proposals would comply with the guidance and policies ACS 1 and LPD 35. Officers recognise that the scattered grass patches provide limited and outdoor amenity space, but instead of pushing the applicant to provide adequate, appropriate and usable amenity space, they have instead advised that residential conversions in urban areas such as this can largely ignore this requirement to policy LPD 35, which sets a concerning precedent. As the applicant's existing buildings provide supported accommodation for vulnerable people, including those with drug and alcohol dependency issues, it is clearly likely that vulnerable people would also be housed in this low-quality housing scheme. This makes the practice worry for the safety and security of our staff who handle and dispense prescription drugs as part of their day-to-day work. Future residents would also need to enter over our land to the rear, screened from public view.
Thank you. Your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this item will now be introduced by Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. The application site is outlined in red. As has been mentioned, you've got the medical facility at the front here, and they're looking to change the use of this part of the building. The application is for the change of use to 11 flats that will be spread over 3 floors. 10 of the units will be 1 bed, and there'll be 1 2-bed. The smallest will be 39 square metres, whilst the majority would be between 45 and 47 square metres in floor area. The 2-bed property would be 61 square metres. The building is currently vacant, but was prior to that use as a dance studio. There will be minor changes to the built form, including insertion of new windows and doors, removal of a porta cabin to the rear. It was intended to render the building, but this has been removed from the application to address ecological concerns. There'll be 14 car parking spaces in total and a cycle store proposed as part of the application. Vehicular access would be from Carlton Hill and Brent Cliff Avenue. The host building is attached to the Peacock Surgery, which is the front of the site, and the application form indicates that the units will be open market housing. It's not intended to be a hostel or any other such use, which would require planning permission in its own right. Located in the main urban area, the site is in a sustainable location close to services. A bus stop is opposite the site, and shops on Carlton Hill a short distance away. As a result, the principle of the change of use is supported, which would provide 11 dwellings in a broadly sustainable location. In respect to residential amenity, adequate amenity space within the properties will be provided to comply with the minimum space standards. And given the relationship with neighbouring properties, it's not considered to be any harm to neighbouring residential units. The design and the layout would also be acceptable. There'd be negligible change to the actual built form. And you can kind of see here, this is the porta cabins that would be removed. And then in effect, the other changes will be relatively minor in terms of like some additional doors inserted in this elevation and just some additional windows. But in terms of the actual change to the built form, it would be relatively minor. In terms of the highways, access would remain the same, and there'd be no change to that aspect. 14 spaces would be provided, and there's a requirement for 0.8 per flat. So there'll be actual over provision of parking over and above that's required by policy. It is a major application, and therefore typically contributions would be sought. However, when vacant buildings are brought back into use, it can be exempt from affordable housing. No additional floor space is proposed as part of this application, and as such, no affordable housing is sought on the scheme. No other statutory consultees have sought contributions, notably education and NHS. As a result, an S106 legal agreement isn't required. However, a local labour agreement is sought, and that can be secured via condition 6. The site is exempt from B&G, and that there's no built form. Just in terms of just the layout, you can see there'll be 3 flats on the lower floor, and then the rest will be spread over the upper 2 floors. But the actual built form wouldn't change significantly. And these are just some pictures just to really understand the context. You can see the Peacock Surgery here at the front, and this is a building that would change to the rear. And these are just some of the views from the north. This is where they'd have some additional doors on the ground floor elevation here. And these are the porta cabins that I mentioned that will be removed to open up that rear aspect courtyard. But yeah, at officer level, we feel it would, in a sustainable location, it's appropriate in terms of design and layout for the occupiers, and we're recommending approval as outlined on pages 49 to 50 of the members' committee report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to propose this item for purpose of debate. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Thank you. Okay, does anyone want to speak on this item? Councillor Catherine Pope.
Thank Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to thank the Speaker for coming, and I know it's always really difficult when your time runs out, but sympathies for that. I just want to check, in some of the letters received from residents as part of the consultation, there was reference to there being a shared entranceway with the medical practice, and could somebody clarify that, because I could see why that would be an issue potentially.
My understanding is that the medical practice has an access to the side with parking round to the rear, so there wouldn't be any conflict between the two. This would be the parking layout for the the change of use, and then the parking for the healthcare would remain unaffected.
So is that a separate entrance? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Thank you.
And thank you. Councillor Strong?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd be glad to see an empty building put to such good use. I do have several things to bring up, so if you don't mind, I'll make a list and then you can perhaps answer in order. One of the first things that occurred to me is that the flat sizes, although apart from the double one, seem to be below the minimum spaces of 50 square metres, especially the flat one, which is also labelled staff, which made me wonder if it was going to be a caretaker flat. The second thing that occurred, the police mentioned security system. Now, I may have missed this in the report. I couldn't see any referral to the recommended security system of locks to ensure that there is no unauthorised entry. The third thing that occurred to me, the parking places, at the moment, there's an upper car park, if you like, next to the health centre. I'm assuming, perhaps I shouldn't, that those are retained for use of the health centre, even though the land is all attributed to this premises. And also, it's right on the boundary with the city. Is that going to cause any problems? Thank you.
In terms of the sizes, the small one at 39 does comply with a minimum space. I think that would be the very smallest you could for the minimum space standards for a one-person occupier. The others between the 45 and 47 would be single occupation again, but they would still comply with the minimum space standards. So, we're content that the scheme would provide adequate amenity. In terms of the police comments, the comments were basically looking to design out crime and making suggestions on, as you say, possible CCTV and things such as that. We can look to perhaps add those comments as informatives, but it would be exceptionally unusual to kind of go to the level of detail of putting, specific locks onto premises and such like. But there'd be no issue in terms of adding some informatives about the suggestions from the police. And in terms of the parking, this is proposed parking for obviously the flats. The parking, I think, in here to the rear is what's for the health centre. So they're going to be completely separate. And then in terms of the city, sorry, what was the question about the city boundary?
Yes, the city boundary, if I remember rightly, is right down Brancliffe Avenue. And I was a little bit concerned in case anybody came in and said part of it is the city, part of it's not. But if you look at the area, if you see it, there's a bit right by Carlton Hill, separated with that high security fencing that seems to be a car park used by the health centre. I just wondered if that would be retained as separate. There's quite some good chunky security fences, those really heavy steel things. And it would seem to be good to have those retained, although, again, I might have missed it in the report. I can't see whether they were retained. Thank you.
In terms of the boundary treatments, really, I can't see that they would change, but the red line for the location here has been amended, because originally it was proposed to, it did extend into this land which was associated with a medical centre. So this red line plan, you'll actually note, is smaller than what you see within the drawing on the in your agenda. So that's actually an error in the committee report. But originally it was coming all the way around here. But with the submitted details showing the land registry, what the actual site owns. So we're content that this red line boundary is accurate to the site ownership, but the boundary treatment shouldn't be changing as a result of this application.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chairman. And I think officers may be a bit surprised when I say well done, and how pleasing I am to see an application come forward that's on a brownfield site, finally, and meets our own car parking standards. I think it goes above our own car parking standards, which we can all be pleased about, and I'm grateful that is finally seems to be happening. A question on the flood risk assessment. So the lead flood authority at paragraph 411 has requested additional information in terms of flood risk. Do we have that yet, and are we satisfied with that? I'm particularly interested in the comments about drainage, because again it says we're yet to receive a report on drainage. As the site is on a hill, there is a huge risk of runoff, which could then impact the residents of Carlton further down the hill, or particularly in the city, if it runs that way. So just some information on that. And a question for the chairman, probably. It's nice to see comments from the ward councillors at paragraphs 4.5 and 4.6. Is that a change in protocol? And if so, can we keep it? Because it's quite positive to see. Presumably they were asked to comment before the report was published. I've not seen that before, but that's a good thing if that's a change. So just a question on the flooding, if I may.
Paragraph 6.15 of the report addresses the issue, but in effect, I think the lead flood authority were misinformed about the size of the site area, but in effect, a flood risk assessment can only be required on sites above 1 hectare in site, and in effect, this falls below the threshold, and ultimately, it's in flood zone 1, and the drainage realistically isn't going to change. The drainage is all there. It's basically using the same surface water, etc. So in effect, I just think that the Lead Flood Authority got a bit confused as to their, for what they're asking for. It just wasn't possible to have it.
It's not a change in protocol. It's yeah. Oh, sorry. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not quite enthusiastic as my colleague, I'm afraid. I'm very concerned about the amount of concerns from the neighbours. There is an awful lot. So I've got two questions. One, have a lot of these concerns been raised by planning with the developer? But the one I'm most concerned about is that one person is saying the works are nearly complete. And if that's the case, I am very concerned about that. And just a little bit of information would be most welcome. Thank you.
We have looked to address all of the concerns that have been raised in the report, and in paragraphs, page 47, 6.25 onwards is where we try to address some of what you consider to be other kind of material considerations, and even some of the points that you wouldn't perhaps say are material planning considerations. But in terms of the works, this picture shows, this one was taken from Street View, and that's, I think they have looked to replace some of the windows. So this one was taken by the officer probably about a week or so ago. So they have taken out some windows, but there's nothing to indicate that they've changed the use or the use has commenced. I think they're basically doing what you might describe as maintenance, but they've not. It's not a retrospective application in terms of the change of use.
Thank you. Any more comments from anybody? Shall we move to the vote? So the recommendation is to grant permission, subject to conditions set out on page 49. All those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. If our guest would like to leave, we're happy for you to do so. You can stay and watch the rest of the committee. Yeah, it's your choice. Thank you. So we move on to agenda item 5. The site location is the previous site of the Nottingham Fire and Rescue Headquarters, Bestwood Lodge Drive, Bestwood. And this will be introduced by Claire.
Thank you, Chair. There is a quick verbal update on this application. Proposed condition 22 on page 68 of the agenda pack should be altered to make the wording clearer, and the wording now proposed is prior to any works being carried out within the root protection area of retained trees, the tree protection fencing shown within the tree protection plan received by the local planning authority 08/12/2025 shall be implemented and retained for the duration of the works. This is a site location plan. The site is a vacant site and it was last used as the Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service headquarters. This is the aerial view of the site, and to the west of the site is Bestwood Country Park. To the north and south are residential properties with Bestwood Lodge Hotel further to the south of the site. And the important thing to note in relation to this application is that these trees here, the mature trees to the north and west of the site, are protected by a woodland tree preservation order. So members may remember last year planning permission was granted for the demolition of the existing buildings on site and the development of a private residential therapy and treatment centre, as shown in these slides here, and development has not yet commenced on site. The applicant is now proposing amendments to the original planning permission, which are, number 1, alterations to ground levels under trees 32, 33 and 34 to facilitate the required gradient for the access drive for emergency vehicles. And this consists of raising ground levels under these trees by between 0.78 and 2.166 metres. And number 2 is removing tree 73 and hedgerow 18 to allow the building of a previously approved wall. And in order to facilitate the above proposals, a number of conditions attached to the original planning permission would require amending. And full details of the proposed wording of the amended conditions are set out in paragraphs 2.5 to 2.7, which are pages 56 to 57 of the committee report. So the main considerations as part of this current planning application are visual amenity and ecology. So turning first to assess the proposed alterations to the ground levels under trees 32, 33 and 34 to facilitate the required gradient for the driveway. It's these trees here, just marked by these black sort of arrows up here. And these are a photo of the trees here. Tree 32 is a yew tree, and trees 33 and 34 are both common lime trees. And the submitted tree survey does identify these trees as category B trees, which are trees of moderate quality. And these trees are also protected by the Woodland Tree Preservation Order. So this plan here shows the proposed access road for the fire vehicles, the emergency vehicles, should they be needed, and the turning area. And then I've just tried to mark which 3 the trees are here, just to show that the access road does just go sort of within their root protection areas. So the application originally proposed altering the wording of the relevant planning conditions to allow for the removal of these 3 trees, albeit the applicant did explain that if possible they would aim to retain the trees. The council's tree officer and ecology officer inspected the trees and both stated that it would be their preference for them to remain due to their high visual amenity and potential ecology value. As such, the planning officer explored whether the proposed emergency fire access was absolutely necessary to serve this development, whether the proposed access was required in this specific location, and whether the ground levels required altering to achieve a shallower gradient to facilitate this. So these are the proposed levels. So with regards to the proposed gradient of the access road, ground levels underneath these 3 trees are required to be raised in order to achieve the required driveway and turning area. So this plan here, the darker the blue, the more the need to build up the land. And this plan here, the 3 trees are here, and they show the figures to which it needs to be raised. So the ground fill would be between 0.78 and 2.166 metres. I think it's probably clearer from a visual point of view on this slide here. The Highway Authority confirmed that the access road should not have a gradient steeper than 1 in 12, and it's currently 1 in 2.5 in some places. However, they did state that there may be other ways of achieving fire regulations, such as installing sprinklers, but that advice should be sought from the building control officer on this matter. As such, the council's building control team then assessed the proposal in terms of whether the access was necessary at all, and they commented that the submitted fire strategy justifies the need for a fire access in this specific location in order to achieve the fire safety standards. Next, it was assessed as to whether these 3 trees really did need to be removed to facilitate this required access. The tree officer has explained that most of the proposed level change under these trees is in an area where there is already existing built development, such as a retaining wall and an existing building close by. I don't know how clear it is from these photos, but there's quite a big land drop here. There's a retaining wall and quite a big land drop here. And then you can just see the existing building on the side here. Structures such as retaining walls and buildings have likely prevented significant tree rooting in the area. And in addition, the proposal is only for ground filling within the root protection area and not the excavation of ground where tree roots could be exposed and severed. And for these reasons, there is a good chance that the existing trees could indeed survive the proposed ground filling. As such, the applicant agreed to amend the proposal from removing these trees to retaining these trees, whilst allowing the required raising of ground levels and ensuring the applicant be responsible for annual inspections of the trees to monitor their health following the filling of land here. Such inspections would be for a period of 5 years, and if any of the trees do die, become severely damaged or require removal, replacement tree planting would be undertaken in accordance with a scheme to be submitted to and approved by the local planning authority. So on balance, it's considered that the above approach is a balanced approach to try to retain the trees, mandate for any replacement trees should the trees be lost, and balance this against the need for an emergency access in this location and the benefits of the development as a whole for a residential therapy and treatment centre. Going back to the proposed site layout, we also need to assess tree 73 and H18, which are marked by these sort of black lines down here. And this is a photo of the tree and hedgerow in question. Tree 73 is a white beam and hedgerow 18 is a Portuguese laurel. And this tree and hedgerow are not protected by the Woodland Tree Preservation Order. Both are identified as category C trees, which are trees of low quality. The applicant has stated that the tree and hedgerow should have been identified to be removed on the original planning application to make way for the wall. The council's tree officer agrees that the tree and hedgerow are of low quality and do not provide a high level of visual amenities to the area. A landscaping scheme has been conditioned as part of the original planning application and shows a suitable level of replacement tree planting. And this condition should be carried over should planning permission be granted for this current proposal. And the council's ecologist has also raised no objections to the removal of this tree and hedgerow. A number of conditions to protect and enhance the ecological value of the site were attached to the original planning permission and should be carried over to the revised application should planning permission be granted. So to conclude, the proposed variations to the original planning application will not have an unacceptable harmful impact of the visual amenity of the area or on ecology, and allowing these amendments will enable the land to be developed for the previously approved private residential treatment and therapy centre. The proposal is in accordance with relevant planning policy, and it's recommended that planning permission be granted subject to the conditions set out in section 10 of the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to propose item 5 for the purpose of debate. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Does anybody want to make any comments at all? Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Chair. Dear. Excuse me. Just a quick question, if I may, just referring to the trees 32, 33 and 34. I note that we can mandate the developer to replace the trees. Is it possible to ask the developer to replace them with mature or semi-mature indigenous trees?
Yes, so it would be in accordance with a scheme that the local planning authority, including the tree officer, would have to agree. We would always seek native trees first. And yes, ideally you'd like them of the same quality. I mean, these are very mature trees. You probably wouldn't get replacements that mature. But yes, it would be, we try to get them as similar as we can.
Thank you. Thanks.
I can't see any more hands. Nobody else wants to comment. Shall we move to the vote? Okay, the recommendation is to grant permission subject to conditions set out on page 96. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous, that's good. That's carried. So we'll move on to item 6, which is an appeal summary. The site location is 8 Tudor Close. This is for noting. Any comments on this one? So we're happy to note this one? Yep, thank you. So we'll move on to item 6. John will introduce this item. This is the 5-year housing land supply for assessment 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, as set out in the report, the recommendation is that committee notes the 5-year housing land supply assessment, which is appended to the report as Appendix A. But just as a means of background, the report sets out the latest 5-year housing land supply position for the council as of the 31st of March 2025. This is a requirement of the NPPF, which requires all local planning authorities to update their 5-year housing land supply assessments annually. So in terms of the 5-year monitoring period, this is from the 1st of April 25 through to the 31st of March 2030. And for clarity, this assessment is against the housing requirement as calculated using the government standard methodology, which was published in May 2025. So the assessment attached shows that the housing land supply, when assessed against the housing target as calculated using the standard methodology, the council does not currently have a 5-year supply plus the 5% buffer. So we currently have a 3.73-year housing land supply. So this equates to an undersupply of 846 homes. So this is a significant decrease from the previous position of 2024, which was a housing land supply of 6.19 years. The main reason for this is due to the changes in the standard methodology, which results in a significant increase in the number of dwellings to be delivered per annum by the council. And this is now 638 dwellings, opposed to previous 460 dwelling requirement. So in terms of the implications, I just thought it'd be useful to run over the implications of this with members and take any questions if there are any. So effectively, this puts us into the tilted balance. Paragraph 11 of the NPPF states that there's a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and planning permission effectively should be granted unless the application of policies in the framework that protect areas or assets of particular importance, so this includes areas of greenbelt land, provides a strong reason for refusing the development proposed, or planning permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So in terms of our position, we are a greenbelt authority. There's around 70% of the borough that is made up of greenbelt. So at the moment, if we did receive a speculative major application in the greenbelt, we'd be considering firstly whether that land is grey belt or not, as defined by the new NPPF. And should that land be considered to be grey belt, and broadly we could support the principle of that development, the golden rules as detailed within the NPPF would then apply to that development. And those golden rules would require a minimum increase over our policy level of affordable housing of 15%. So our affordable housing requirement ranges from 10% to 30%. So most of the rural areas are a 30% requirement. So if we were to see a major housing development in the Greenbelt, it's likely that it would be at least a 45% affordable housing requirement. So the implications of that would likely mean that development isn't viable and is unlikely to come forward in the short term. We're obviously progressing the new Gedling Borough local plan, and that will allocate sites for development, and that will be moving towards approval in the spring. So then we'll have a good idea of what sites we're wishing to allocate and the most appropriate sites for development, and the potential for any sites to be released from the Greenbelt. So in the short term, we shouldn't see any large-scale speculative developments in the countryside, but I just thought it'd be useful to make members aware of the implications of not having a 5-year housing land supply, and take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Any questions at all? Okay, so this is for noting. Are we happy to note this report? Yeah. Thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is the authority monitoring report from April 2024 to March 2025. This will also be introduced by John.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is just a report for noting, and as you can see, the report's attached as Appendix A, and it is very detailed. So the monitoring report is, again, prepared annually, and the updated version covers a period from the 1st of April 24 through to the 31st of March 2025. So effectively, the monitoring report monitors the implementation of the local plan against the monitoring indicators set out within the policies of both the Greater Nottingham Aligned Course Strategy and within the Gedling Borough local planning document. And it covers topics such as climate change, flood risk and water management, environmental protection, greenbelt, natural environment, open space and recreational facilities, historic environment, design, homes, retail, transport and infrastructure. It's probably interesting to note that in terms of the housing delivered, we have delivered 478 dwellings during the monitoring period. So that is in excess of our previous housing requirement. So in terms of delivery, we are delivering a large number of homes, but due to the NPPF changes that I've just discussed, we are now required to deliver a significantly greater number of dwellings in the future. Are there any questions from members? on the monitoring report?
I can't see anyone indicating. Okay, thank you. So we're happy, this is for noting, we're happy to note this report. Thank you, John. So item 9 is the future planning applications, which is for noting. Do we have any comments on this item? Happy to note it. Thank you. Item 10 is the planning delegation panel action sheets, which is for noting. Any comments at all? If so, we're happy to note that also. And finally, I have no urgent business, so thank you for attending the meeting tonight. Thank you.